I'm going to pray and then we'll get started. I didn't pray, right? Father God, thank you for today. Thank you for these students. Thank you for the prayer chapel we just had, Father, a time of coming before you and confession and in praise and in intercession for others. What a privilege it is to pray, and particularly to pray for our students, for our teachers. And just grateful that you hear those prayers, Father. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we're going to begin by reading this entire passage again. So you can follow along with me on the board. And it says this. And as he passed, so as Jesus passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Having said these things, he spit on the ground and made mud with the saliva. Then he anointed the man's eyes with the mud and said to him, go wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So he went, the blind man went and washed and came back seeing. The neighbors and those who had seen him before as a beggar were saying, is this not the man who used to sit and beg? Some said, it is he. Others said, no, but he is like him. He kept saying, I am the man. So they said to him, then how were your eyes opened? He answered, the man called Jesus made mud and anointed my eyes and said to me, go to Siloam and wash. So I went and washed and received my sight. They said to him, where is he? He said, the blind man said, I don't know. They brought to the Pharisees the man who had formerly been blind. Now, it was a Sabbath day when Jesus made the mud and opened his eyes. So the Pharisees again asked him how he had received his sight. And he said to them, he put mud on my eyes, and I washed, and I see. Some of the Pharisees said, this man is not from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath. But others said, how can a man who is a sinner do such great signs? And there was a division among them. So they said again to the blind man, what do you say about him? Since he has opened your eyes. The blind man said, he is a prophet. The Jews did not believe that he had been blind and had received his sight until they called the parents of the man who had received his sight and asked them, is this your son who you say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents answered, we know that this is our son and that he was born blind, but how he now sees we do not know, nor do we know who opened his eyes. Ask him, he is of age. He will speak for himself. His parents said these things because they feared the Jews, for the Jews had already agreed that if anyone should confess Jesus to be Christ, he would be put out of the synagogue. Therefore his parents said, he is of age, ask him. So for the second time, they called the man who had been blind and said to him, give glory to God. We know that this man is a sinner. Jesus is a sinner. He answered, whether he is a sinner or not, I do not know. One thing I do know, that though I was blind, now I see. They said to him, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? He answered them, I have told you already, and you would not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you also want to become his disciples? And they reviled him, saying, you are his disciple, but we are disciples of Moses. We know that God has spoken to Moses, but as for this man, we do not know where he comes from. The man answered, why, this is an amazing thing. You do not know where he comes from, and yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners, but if anyone is a worshiper of God and does his will, God listens to him. Never since the world began has it been heard that anyone opened the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could not do anything. He could do nothing. They answered him, you were born in utter sin, and would you teach us? And they cast him out. Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? He answered, And who is it, sir, that I may believe in him? Jesus said to him, you have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you. He said, Lord, I believe, and he worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind. Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, are we also blind? Jesus said to them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains. So, we have this passage of this man born blind who Jesus healed in an unusual way, making mud with his own spit and putting it on his eyes and having him go wash in the pool of Siloam. It's kind of a different miracle for Jesus. Could he have just said, eyes be open, or whatever he wanted to say, and healed the man? Yeah, he's God, so he can do whatever he wants. So why this way? Well, we'll talk about that a little bit. And the curriculum talks about the spiritual ignorance of the Pharisees, which is true. They were ignorant. They also misunderstood, another theme in John. They misunderstood who Jesus was, and they misunderstood who his father was, who he was talking about when he talked about his father, and other misunderstandings, other things about which they didn't understand, they didn't know. And so multiple times they attempted to stone him, even in this particular, or in our last lesson, we saw that. So in that last lesson, it says Jesus hid himself. We don't exactly know what that means, but he escaped the stoning. So as this begins, it says, as he passed by, he saw a man blind from birth. So this is after the Feast of Tabernacles. We have no way of knowing how long after the Feast of Tabernacles. It may have been very close. It may have been immediately after the Feast of Tabernacles. There may have been some time that passed by. We can't know, but this is something that happened after that. And we learn some important things about Jesus in this story. We see his compassion. We see the disciples. We'll see the disciples and how they are misunderstanding things as well. And we see this miracle, this interesting miracle. And then we see this blind man who moves from being blind both spiritually and physically to having sight both spiritually and physically. So here's some things we learn from this passage that we're about to read. We learn about the compassion of Jesus. He was never too busy to take time for people. He didn't tell people, go away, I don't want to help you. He was never too busy to help people. He was more concerned with the welfare of others than his own. And he noticed the outcasts of society, the ones whom people typically shunned, the ones who were unincluded, the ones who were unseen. He saw those people. Would that we were all this way. Would that we were all never be too busy to talk to somebody about Jesus and be more concerned about the welfare of others than our own welfare. And that we would notice those the world doesn't notice. We would notice the people that are outcasts. We would notice those who are unseen. Jesus talks about this when he talks about in Matthew. I'm pretty sure it's Matthew. He goes through this whole thing about people who don't have time for him. They'd say, when I was hungry and you didn't feed me, when I was lacking clothing, you didn't clothe me, when I was in prison, you didn't come visit me. And they say, Well, Lord, when were you hungry and we didn't feed you? And when were you, in prison and we didn't come to see you? And when were you thirsty and we didn't give you drink? And he said, as you did it not to the least of these, you did it not to me. And then he turns to another group and he says, and this is actually God. He's talking about heaven, but and he turns to the other group. God turns to the other group and says, "When I was hungry, you fed me, and when I was thirsty, you gave me drink, and when I was in prison, you visited me." And they said, "When did we do that?" And Jesus said, "As you did it to the least of these, my brothers, you did it to me." Here's what Jesus is saying: is when we minister to people in need, when we meet other people's needs, whether those are physical needs, spiritual needs, emotional needs, when we do that with a heart of grace, when we do that, we are doing it to Jesus, just as if we are doing it to Jesus. And so not only did Jesus live this way, he calls us to live this way too. To see the unseen, to include the unincluded. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but this is the story of my teenage life. That I was always on the outside. I was never in. And how I would have loved to have somebody come spend time with us. And Jesus was that way. He took the people that society had cast off and said, "You're my people." And we're supposed to be about that too. God's economy is different than the world's economy. God's economy is about success and winning people over so that you can become more wealthy and all these things. God's economy is lay down your life and you'll find it. If you're going to spend your time trying to enrich your own life, literally and figuratively, you will lose your life. If you spend your life on others, on Jesus, on that which doesn't necessarily profit you, you'll gain life. There are many paradoxes in God's economy. A paradox is something that doesn't make sense, but it's true. When we lose our lives for the sake of Jesus, we gain the only true life that there is. Which is why for so many years I was unhappy and angry and rebellious. Because I didn't realize that I was chasing stuff that would never make me happy and fulfilled. And so the world's philosophy is look out for yourself. And Jesus says, nope, lay down your life for others. Just as he laid down his life for others. Look, sometimes we look down on other people, maybe because, I don't know, they're poor or they don't look like us or there's some sin in their life or they don't know Jesus, and we tend to look down on those people. Jesus never rejected people, even the people that didn't know him yet. In fact, the people he rejected were the self-righteous people in power. Not the poor people, not the blind people, not the woman caught in adultery. Those people he embraced. The people who, the self-righteous people, refused to love and refused to care for, the lost, the sick, the imprisoned, the destitute. Jesus said we're to be about that. He was about that, taking care of those people. And the fact that Jesus was all about that should cause us to think and cause us to consider what we're giving our lives over to. Look, you are going to give your life over to something. Everybody gives their life over to something or someone. The only question is it really worthy of giving my life over? I remember seeing this, I don't know if I've told you about this before, but I remember seeing, like, within a few days of each other, two different things. The first thing was we were going, I don't even know where we were going. I think we were going to look for a lake, house on a lake for my mother's best friend. And we're on the way back, and it's my mom, and I think Katie was with us. I'm not sure. She was little. It was my mom and her best friend and me, and we came upon all these vans next to a barn. And there was a big sign that said flyball tournament. Y'all know what flyball is? It's incredibly fun. So it's a sporting event for dogs. And here's what they do. It's like there's this track, and in my memory, the track was longer than maybe not quite as long as my room going this way, but about that. And so they're in this track, and they're side by side tracks. And the dogs, the gate goes up, right? The door goes up, and the dogs go racing down to the end. And there's this board that they put their hands on, and when they put their paws, they don't have hands. They put their paws on, and when they hit that board, a tennis ball comes flying out of the wall. They grab it in their mouth, and they turn around and they run back. And the first dog to get back with the ball wins this fly ball, heat. And then all the winners go against each other until you have a fly ball champion. It's a whole lot of fun to watch. But as we were leaving, I noticed something. As we were leaving, I saw all these vans, and some of them were open because, the tournament was kind of ending or the losers were leaving or whatever. And these vans had one purpose, and one purpose. These weren't vans for their family. These are vans for their dog, their flyball dog. Like the back of the van had everything. Like this was the Taj Mahal for a dog. Like everything this dog could possibly need was in this van. And the entire purpose of the van was to help this dog do the best that he could at flyball. Which I'm not saying there's something wrong with that. I'm just saying tens of thousands of dollars for a van. And then a few days later, we were having brunch after church at what used to be the Officers Club at Offutt. And as we're leaving over by the old headquarters of SAC, there's this huge, or was, I don't know, I've been on base in years. I've lost my ID. They lose it. They cancel it when you turn 22. So there's this huge parking lot. And there are these cars, and they're racing, but they're not like NASCAR cars. They're like miniature NASCAR cars. Like they're not go-karts. But you just think like what would be halfway between NASCAR and go-karts. So they're like, honey, I shrunk the NASCAR. Okay. That's what they are. Have you seen this before? And they're racing, and they look exactly like a NASCAR, like a car, like it's painted on there, and the names and the people that are sponsoring them, and all of it. It's just smaller, and they've got trailers for their car, and they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to race little cars. Now, I know this is going on YouTube, so this one can get me. My husband works at and they have a racetrack there for radio control cars. And people come in every weekend. Like they had over 400 people in the race last Saturday. My husband didn't get home until very, very late. And again, tens of thousands of dollars being spent so you can do this and race other people doing this. Right? So, and again, I'm not saying any of it's sinful, but here is what I'm saying. Everybody gives their life over to something. Everybody gives their life over to something. That doesn't rust, doesn't rot, that doesn't die. Because you're going to give your life over to something. It should be something that's eternal. Should be someone who is eternal. So the curriculum is going to say we see the simple-mindedness of the disciples. I think that's a little harsh, but that's what goes in the blank, so go ahead and put it. The misunderstanding, again, they didn't get it yet. They would get it eventually. They just didn't get it yet. And his disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the words of God might be displayed in him. We must work the works of him who sent me while it is day. Night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. So here is their error. They saw this physical problem of blindness as being punishment for sin. He's blind. He's not supposed to be blind. Blind is bad. So somebody must have been being punished for sin. So was it his parents? So God is punishing their kid who never did anything wrong yet? Or did he somehow sin in the womb? And so then God went, boom, you're blind. That's not the God we serve. And Jesus explains to them, nobody sinned for this time. But God can show his power and his majesty even through this. Look, there are some physical problems that are caused by sin. If you're going to smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day for 50 years, don't blame God. God didn't do that. If you're going to drink in excess and drive drunk and get in an accident and kill somebody, don't blame God for that. God didn't do that. You chose to do that. So there are some problems, there are some results that are caused by sin. But not every malady, not every bad thing that happens is caused by sin. Mr. Hood, I think you know, lost his sister, more than a year ago now. She had melanoma, she had cancer, and it eventually spread throughout her body. And God was glorified in that whole process. Nothing. She wasn't being punished. And she loved Jesus, and I think she would tell you right now she was to be with Jesus. So they just don't understand. The disciples just don't understand. So here's the truth. The truth is that physical elements allow God to manifest his glory. Jesus' answered, it was not that this man sinned or his parents, but that the works of God might be displayed in him. Look, God is best able to use us when we are at our weakest. You know why? Because then it's not God, it's not us doing the work, it's God doing the work. When we give up and when we are at our lowest points, that's when God can step in and say, I've got this for you. I'll take care of this. God can and will use trials and difficulties and illnesses, not only for our benefit, but also for our glory, if we will, or for his glory, if we will live him. Sometimes, and I know this is hard for you to understand at your age, sometimes when you look back on, say, almost 60 years, and you see things that were heartbreaking, and things that you thought were disasters, and things that you thought were awful, and things that you thought you had missed out on that stuff, you look back on all of that, and you go, when you're in the middle of it, no, does not feel that way. And if you go to somebody who's in the middle of a bad time and say, God's going to use this for his glory, you're going to get slapped. And you probably deserve it. Because that's not the time to say God's working all things together for the good in this horrible situation. But the truth is that he does work. And he can use these things. But we don't really realize it when we're in the middle. We will someday. Someday we'll see it. Just not while we're in it. There are a lot of examples of this. Your book gives you this example of Fanny Crosby, who was one of the greatest hymn writers ever. She I don't know how if you know him, but we'll pick up with Fanny Crosby tomorrow.